on the belief that this school would become a second home for me. Definitely a beautiful campus at first, but I've come to the realization of the facade that U of A has, where they do care for their students, but in reality, they only care for their money. I have faced microaggressions, covert racism, sexism, and elitism in my own program and on campus, especially from my own advisor, who started off with me on my journey throughout my program as a confidant and ally, just to turn around and not only call me a unicorn and say that I'm a rarity and make it seem as if it was in positives, but to now start discouraging me from continuing the program when I was facing my own issues externally from the school, telling me that maybe if I can't afford it, then I should just drop out or switch my major. Or when I was dealing with my own trauma of being sexually harassed, that I was just a beautiful girl and why wouldn't anybody harass me? Or also when she mistaked me for another Black student, when CAPLA barely has any diversity in the college, and the only 2 other Black students that I have ever encountered in the program are in my graduating class, and the interaction she had while mistaking me for another Black student was very negative and aggressive when I was just coming to her for advice on my scheduling. I regret coming to the U of A, because if I knew that I was going to be experiencing this kind of racism and treatment from people who are supposed to be helping me reach success in higher education, I would have taken my money and being put into debt somewhere else where they genuinely care for their students' success and the environment that they're putting them in. We are currently dealing with 2 pandemics, racism and COVID. And again, as I said to Ms. Selena prior to this meeting, that the world is watching how universities handle this and how they're molding their youth. And I will never forget how U of A handles these 2 situations as long as I continue to breathe. So I hope that you can do what is right, President Robbins, and make this a safer environment for the students that are giving their money to this institution and putting their faith into you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Malika. Before we do officially begin, we do have some community norms. 1, administratives, please be mindful and respectful. This is a student space created by, for students, for students. That means drop any guards, any tactical gears that you have come prepared with, because that's just not something that we're going to tolerate in this space. Drop any expectations that you have for this meeting, because with our incident with Selena last 2 weeks ago, I think, she did believe that we weren't going to get personal, but these political issues are personal, especially to Black folks. So we will be talking about personal narratives. 2, if you interrupt a student, you will be muted. If you undermine a student experience, you will be muted. If you go over your allotted time, you will be muted. So again, please be respectful and mindful of our time. Okay, so the reason why we are here today is that on Saturday, June 6, 2020, the Black Student Union and Black Lives Matter Tucson collaborated to create the celebration of Black lives, an inspiring, radical, and beautiful event that was grounded on unapologetically celebrating, embracing all layers of Blackness. The purpose of this event was to show that Black people being in community with one another and expressing their Black joy is a form of protest and an important aspect of the Black liberation and revolution. However, despite the reassurance that it was given to the BSU and Black Lives Matter Tucson that there will be no police presence at the event, approximately 50 uniformed officers from the University of Arizona Police Department marched into the student union dressed in heavy riot gear, including batons, gas masks, and other tactical police gear. It took an hour of threatening to cancel the event and negotiating with President Robbins and Chief Brian Seastone to get the uniformed officers to leave the premises with their vehicles. However, there were still remaining uniformed officers who surveillanced the event from various buildings around campus. Black student organizers at the university and Black organizers from the greater Tucson community should not have been forced to endure that inhumane interaction, especially with the racial violence and police brutality occurring across the nation. Regardless of whether the intentions were to protect us and to follow university protocol, the assumption that our event would require such heavy policing is violent in and of itself. Assumptions like these are why the Black community is constantly hurting. The policing from an institutional level is not only contributing to the anti-blackness of the university's values, but perpetuating the concept that Black spaces created by Black people are inherently violent and policing. President Robbins, one of the main reasons why the event for me personally was harmful is because of your behavior in terms of being dismissive and the lack of urgency that you had in order to address the issue that was happening. The two Black women who were screaming and yelling and who were angry had every single right to be expressive in that way. However, you were in a rush to get to a different meeting rather than trying to understand that these women have every right to be angry, and instead of trying to quickly get the police officers out, you were very dismissive. Your body language and your facial expressions and the way that you were talking to even me and other students was completely disrespectful and very dismissive, and that was wrong. So we want you to apologize and to explain to us why you think that your actions were also violent. And President Robbins, you have 2 minutes.
Could you repeat the last, why my actions were?
Why your actions were violent.
So I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to speak for 2 minutes. I would say that when I arrived on the scene, I was approached and told that I lied about something that I'd never met anybody who was involved in this process. I went in and talked to Chief Seastone. I came back out, and then I encountered the organizer from Black Lives Matter, who told me that the event was going to be canceled. I said, please don't cancel the event. I went in and talked to Chief Seastone, and the officers left as they were requested to do.
Great. In order for us to, actually, let's not even do that. So you don't see a problem with you don't see any issues with the way that you've handled the situation?
Well, I did not intend to be dismissive or violent. If I offended anyone, I definitely apologize sincerely for that. But that was not my intention. I was there to try to understand what was going on and to try and de-escalate the situation and get the police to leave, which they did.
Brian Seastone, we would also like to hear from you. Please try to apologize and try to take accountability for the ways that you have all reacted in that situation. And Brian Seastone, you do have also 2 minutes.
Thank you for having us here today. I want to explain a little bit about the event and the way that I believe everybody understood what was going to occur that day was not what was given to other people that were part of that event. There were never any promises made. And as soon as the president explained the concerns, I also said that we didn't want the event to be canceled. And so with that, we visited with several members, and we made an agreement that we would leave the area, but we said that we would be within parameters of that area and that we would only respond as necessary, which we did to several medical calls and several other calls that occurred during that time frame. Overall, the event went very well, and we were very, very happy for it. And that's what we were there to do, was to be sure that the event was safe for all of those that were participating, to make it a safe and secure environment, and to ensure that the event could go on safely for everyone.
Okay, could you also explain if, in my experience, when I've seen UAPD, I've never seen them in anything else besides their regular uniforms. So could you explain why for this event and for the event that happened 2 weeks ago, like the Wednesday event that happened with the other student organization, could you explain why these two events that were inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd, why it was necessary for UAPD to be stationed in the student union with batons and other tactical gears. Why was it necessary for them to equip themselves in that aspect when that has never happened at our university, when we've never seen UAPD wearing any of those stuff that they were wearing on Saturday's events? Why was that necessary?
Well, first of all, they were not in any special gear. They were in their regular uniforms that they wear for patrol. We wear exterior vests for the officers' comfort, for one. The bags that you saw are part of their patrol bags. And as part of patrol, they do have batons. They also carry their helmets in their cars, etc. And the reason is because for the last 2 weeks before, there had been violent situations, not only in Tucson, but around the country. And we need to make sure that if we had to take an action to protect the event, that our officers were safe to be able to go into that and do so effectively. This isn't anything that we don't have for football games or other events on campus.
The problem with that is it seems that you're more focused on making sure that your officers are prepared and safe rather than focusing on the safety of students, specifically Black students, who said that the event was going to be peaceful and celebratory. So again, we don't understand why batons were needed and why those other things in the bag were needed.
Well, again, it's for the safety of everybody there so that we can protect folks if we absolutely needed to in those cases. If there were also counter demonstrators at events around the Tucson area and around the country. There have been many very peaceful events that have been interrupted by other people. And I want to refer back to the event on June 3rd, which again was a very peaceful celebration, etc. And I was out there that day with the crowd, etc. And we also had some people there that we had a pretty good suspicion that they were there to cause some problems. And once members of the group brought it to our attention, we were able to go over, be in that area, and people left without any issue. That's what we were there for, is to ensure that the event could go on safely for all of you. We have to be able to protect ourselves to protect other people as well.
The problem with both of your responses, President Robbins and Brian Seastone, is, again, there's no accountability. You're not owning up to anything right now in terms of like the harm that you've caused and the problems that you have caused and the agitation and frustration that you've caused. You're again more focused on explaining rather than just saying, yes, what we did was an amateur move. And yes, we acknowledge that what we did was harmful and violent. And yes, what we caused was not something that we were thinking in the best interest of students, because that doesn't seem like what it looks like. And it's like, we're asking for you to just acknowledge that, and you're not doing that. We would like a response.
I'm not going to apologize for protecting our community. I'm sorry that there was miscommunication. And I think Dean Washington White can explain a little bit more about that. There was never any promise that law enforcement would not be at that event. I was told on Friday afternoon before the event that UAPD was not going to be there and that we had promised. No one in my department had made that promise. and it's completely contrary. Like I said, what we want to do is ensure that the event was safe for all. And we were actually thanked by individuals for being there, both events, on the 3rd and also the 6th as we were leaving that area, or that they saw us as they were leaving. So if people were upset by that presence, I'm sorry for that. But I won't apologize for us doing our job to ensure that everyone there was safe that day.
Our understanding was that in terms of the police presence, that they would be far away from the events, and they were literally 2 minutes away, housed in the student union. And then our other understanding was that there were only going to be 2 to 3 cops, not in any of the uniforms or anything. They were going to be in plain clothing, again, very far from the event. And no one would know that there will be police present. That was our understanding, and that was what was communicated to us. But anyway, again, does not matter what you have to say, because you're not going to apologize for it, and you're not actually going to own up to it, and that's okay. That's fine. But we're going to jump into, you don't get to explain yourself in this situation because we already understand where your stance is, and we don't want to hear it. Anyways, we do want to jump into the Q&A portion. We do have several questions for administration, because we understand that what happened at that event and the June 3rd event, regardless of whether people thanked you, that doesn't matter, because that's not the issue. It's much bigger than just you showing up. It's all of these things that you all promised of, like, standing in solidarity with your Black brothers and sisters, and you just causing more harm and more agitation than actually doing what is right, and understanding the institutional and structural changes that need to happen in order to ensure the safety of students from an aspect that's not rooted in policing. So we're gonna ask a couple questions, and each person is gonna be given about 2 minutes to respond. Lone will be leading the questions as well as I.
Hello, my name is Lone Malefo. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am also a student at the University of Arizona studying chemical engineering and a proud member of COBA. So like my co-facilitator and moderator said, we'll be taking turns asking any one of you questions, so any one of you should be prepared. So let's just get into it, and please keep your answers brief, like Marian said, about 2 minutes, because we don't really have much time. But yeah, anyone should be prepared. Okay, the first question goes to Lisa. Lisa, could you explain why UAPD has a 5.8 million budget and student success and accomplishment only has a 1.9 million budget? How could you possibly be centering student success and engagement when the funds are significantly less than the funds used to police students? Furthermore, could you tell us how much of this budget is spent on surveillance and weaponization in comparison to community-centered practices and training? Lisa, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lane, for the question, and thank you all for allowing me to participate today. Unfortunately, I don't have the UAPD budget right in front of me, or the student success budget in front of me, but I am happy to share with you after this meeting the details of our budgets for student affairs and for police. Chief Seastone may be more familiar with how much of his budget is allocated to personnel and what's allocated to operations, as he's been in this position for many years. It is very important for us. Safety is critical for our entire community. We have the authority to have 66 commissioned officers here at the University of Arizona. Much of our budget goes to those positions. And we are in the process of reviewing the budgets for the entire institution for fiscal year 21. And we'll be considering the recommendations and demands that you all have shared with us as we set the fiscal year 21 budget. again, I will commit to sharing information with you about both student affairs and UAPD after this meeting. May I cede my time to Chief Seastone to add anything that he can share about the details of the budget?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Brian Seastone.
Sure, thank you. Our total budget, about 84%, approximately 84%, goes to salaries for the approximately 122 employees that we have. That includes the police officers, the civilian employees, and the student employees that we have. And I'm sorry, the last part of your question was how much goes to what in the department?
How much goes to surveillance and weaponization in comparison to community-centered practices and training?
To surveillance?
Yes.
Okay, surveillance, we have a budget of 0. We don't have a line for surveillance whatsoever. All of our funds are allocated for general operations, et cetera, after the salaries. I mean, we don't have a special component that does surveillance or anything like that.
But is it true that, but it is true that the police budget is way higher than like the student budget, even though maybe the actual numbers may vary. Is that like true, that your budget is way more than the student budget?
Lana, may I answer?
Yes.
Thank you. It depends on which component of the student budget are we talking about. Student affairs is much larger than $5.5 million. It's much larger than UAPD. We spend a tremendous amount of our resources on student success. So it is not a true statement to say that we are spending less on student services than on UAPD. You may be thinking about one specific department. If you give me the details, if you can put them in chat as to what you'd like to see, I'm happy to share budget information.
Okay.
Well, our next question is for Brian Seastone. You've stated multiple times in a meeting that we've been together for BSU that you're an openly gay officer. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate your LGBTQ identity in a profession when a majority of LGBTQ history is rooted in anti-policing? How can you assure the safety to LGBTQ students, especially transgender students of color, who have historically faced higher rates of violence from law enforcement?
Okay. To be real honest, it's been very difficult to work with some of the members of the LGBTQ community. For the years that I've been chief, I have tried to work with all groups. And what I've really found is that there has been some hesitation. It's been more at a student level, whatever. I worked with the county attorney on a student that had a concern about things that were happening on 4th Avenue as well as on campus, but they were afraid to come forward and discuss that. I want to do as much as we can to promote all of the groups on our campus. I would love to have more LGBTQ officers, more Black officers, Pacific Islander, etc. I'll sit down with anybody, anytime. And one of the things that I've tried to do for the last couple of years is to have a lunch and sit down with members of each community at that lunch just to answer questions or to be available to come to those meetings. All I need to do is be asked and I'll be there.
The question is more towards how are you acknowledging the historical policing of these queer, transgender, Black people of color,
okay,
and what you're going to do in order to ensure their safety. And that's not going to happen just because you sit with them in a lunch. That's not going to happen just because you include more LGBTQ people in your workforce. Like, the police is not meant for the protection of Black bodies and brown bodies. It's not meant for the protection of queer people. And because the University of Arizona will never disarm your police department, will never abolish your police department, we're stuck with thinking about how do we structurally change the way that you think about these things, these historical aspects of policing, and what you're going to ensure, like how you're going to ensure the safety of these students while acknowledging the complicated and complex relationships of policing and BIPOC communities, specifically queer BIPOC communities.
Okay.
So it doesn't start with lunch.
I'm sorry?
It doesn't start with having a sit down. That's not how that works.
No, I've also had training for all of my officers in trauma-informed investigations, which is a way to better work with victims and survivors. I've put every officer and every member of my department through an 8-hour transgender awareness training. I want to have more of these trainings to help us better understand how we can work with the community to answer their questions so that we can respond to concerns even more. If people don't report these crimes to us or their issues or concerns, it's difficult for us to fix an issue that they may be experiencing. It's an open communication. That's what we really need. And that's what I've been trying to communicate, is that we've got to start somewhere. And if I can start with a small group or a larger group, and we hear about the issues, the concerns, etc., what can we do together to make an imperfect system a little more perfect?
The response to that would be, the response to that is that it's not, open communication is not possible when students do report these issues. And of course, there are systems that protect the people who are causing these harm, whether it's your officers or people on an administrative level. There's just so many loopholes that students have to go through reporting. And then even then, the reports are not investigated. So there's no, like, students could report, students can protest, students can address their issues and concerns. But if the administration does not have a clear way of actually investigating and dealing with these people who are causing harm and violence on our campus, then what's the point of this open communication? We're doing our part. We're doing the reporting. We're doing the thing of addressing these issues and saying that they exist. But if on an administrative level, if y'all are not actually investigating these people and trying to get rid of them, then what's the point? Open communication does not work if on an administrative level, there's no action. Action that actually holds these people accountable and lets them know that this issue, this behavior is not tolerated at our university. But again, there are systems within our own university that protect these people who have caused harm. But we're gonna move on to the next question.
Okie dokie. Let us move to number 3. John Dudas. You have been a witness to 3 to 4 list of demands since the 2016 MSUA list of demands. So none of this is new to you. And it is quite unfortunate to know that it has been 4 years and students' needs and demands still have not been adequately met. Because you've been here since 2016, explain how you have proactively held yourself responsible and accountable for meeting students' needs, as well as holding other people accountable and advocating for the list of demands. 1 minute.
Thank you. I have worked on various things, appreciate the opportunity to speak about it, and have been here for a number of years. Worked with CFOs and heads of student organizations, and also with Department of Equity Inclusion and others to address the demands. Some of the lists of demands, some of the items have been addressed, some have been discussed. I know many of you may have met with folks from equity and inclusion and others. I think our leadership team has held ourselves accountable by discussing with each other how to meet certain demands. I think we've talked about revamping and reorganizing equity and inclusion in ways that we think will help solve it, looking at things structurally. I think we've met with individuals of different groups in different areas, working with cultural centers and others to try to address demands. So I think there's changes that have happened in structure to become more efficient. There's been additional dollars that have been put in for equity and inclusion in different areas to become both more efficient. And so I'll stop there. I don't know if you have follow-up. I think I reached my minute.
I have quickly a follow-up question. When you say that even in 2016, some of the demands were discussed, have they been implemented, or it was just a discussion?
I think there have been, I think what we can share with you, something that came out of equity and inclusion, a list of different demands, what has been done and followed up. This is something that when Ron Wilson was with equity and inclusion, that was the #1 priority, really, to say, listen, look at these. He put together a list. We can talk about which ones I think he felt that we felt have been addressed, which people are working on, who are working on different areas. So I think, yes, some have been discussed, others have been addressed. I think part of the strategic plan included changes that we wanted to have. So yeah, I think some addressed, some discussed, others still under discussion.
Okay. Marian, would you like to read that?
Our next question is for Liesl. Liesl, you have released numerous statements regarding initiatives for diversity, inclusion, and wanting to change the university for the better. However, whenever faculty, staff, or others in higher positions than students speak up and challenge the views of higher ups, they have been alienated from their jobs and have been asked to step in line. How do you expect change to happen when the people who are advocating in these administrative spaces are being ostracized just for speaking up?
Thank you, Mariam. I probably need more detail on specifics because I can assert that I have never challenged anybody's right to speak up or their right to continue to hold their jobs after speaking up. And I can assert that pretty fulsomely. So if you've got more detail, love to hear it. Not quite sure where to go with that one. Welcome further dialogue, more thought on more inputs that I can think on what exactly it is that you're poking at.
I think the question is about, there's always been pushback. Of course, I'm not going to reveal any names, but there has been pushback on an administrative level when people who do radical and transformative work on our campus, especially faculty and staff, when they are put in administrative level positions or are interacting with you or anyone else who's administrator and who has much more power than they do,
Mm-hmm.
they oftentimes feel as though they're not being heard. They're being alienated and their jobs are being put on the line. So, and this goes for a question for everybody to think about, but I want you to answer since you are the person who makes these choices. How are you going to ensure that these spaces are free, safe spaces for faculty and staff to advocate and to challenge institutional things that exist that continuously are failing students as well as faculty and staff?
Okay, Marian, I think you put your finger on a really important cultural point for the campus. I do feel that we have a strongly hierarchical campus and that people do feel intimidated about bringing forward challenging ideas or sharing experiences that shouldn't have happened. And like all cultural challenges, it's a hard one to unpick, right? It's deep in our organization, deep in our hierarchy. And so, you know, that won't be an overnight fix. It does take me having an open office door policy, meaning I welcome people to tell me what's going on from every level. That can be challenging in itself to any hierarchical organization, because people feel that they got bypassed potentially, and that, you know, if people can come and tell me things, then why didn't they tell their line manager, and so on and so on. But I do feel that it's critically important. We're not going to unpick that one quickly. I'll be very clear about that. What we also, though, need to be really clear about, and actually, interestingly, I was working on an issue of this sort just this morning, is that if we feel that somebody has been wrongly harmed because they were being vocal or having opinions that didn't line up completely with their leadership, then we need to get into that quickly and swiftly and make sure that that harm is undone. I will say, though, that we also have, we are still an organization, and at the end of the day, we all have to pull together in some sort of an orderly fashion if we want the campus to function. So there's a place for dissenting views, absolutely. But once decisions have been made about how we're going to execute on something, which way we're going to go, how we're going to do it, we do require, like any organization, we do require that our employees are able to support moving forward in the directions that have been determined. So the place for dialogue is in setting the direction, absolutely. And then we want robust dialogue and the ability for everybody to be heard. Once we've established a direction, it is important that people are able to say, okay, I don't agree with that. It wasn't my preferred choice. I would have gone down this path, not that path. But if we're going down that path, I have to do my job now. I need to support the institution in moving down that path. That's true at every level. That's true in a research group. That's true in a study group. That's true in a department level. At every layer in the organization, we have to be able to operate with a level of professionalism, if you like, that says we can discuss things, we can settle on a path forward, and we can line up behind that path forward, even if it wasn't our path forward, even if it wasn't our preferred choice. So that's complicated, I get. But what we have to do is make sure there's robust dialogue in determining which way we're going, I would suggest.
Interesting. Next question.
Okay, the next question is still for you, Liesl. Who are the people and ideas that you use to analyze what is a problem and how problems should be solved? In other words, who are the people and what are the texts, research, tools that inspire and influence your ideologies of diversity and inclusion in regards to institutional change and dismantling oppressive systems?
What a great question, Lone. So I, read texts from a wide variety of sources. I wouldn't say that I'm a particular adherent of, a particular philosophy, if you like. And I would say that particularly strongly as somebody who came to this country as an adult, and I suspect I'm not alone in that. And so learning about racism in America from something of an outsider's perspective is certainly interesting, and you could spend obviously an entire life developing your thinking about it and still never be done, because there's so much to learn. Now, there are very topical books, of course, How to Be an Anti-Racist, the books on identity. There's, do I look at those books that are, and could I, we talk about the books that are really at the high on the bestseller list right now? Yes, you could, and they've all informed my my thinking in the moment. But I don't know that that's a settled subject, right? America has a lot to reckon with, and we locally have a lot to reckon with. The subject of, I'm very interested in the subject of reparations. How do we think about reparations for Native American people, for African American peoples? How do we think about that as a nation? So I think we've got a long way to go. So I wouldn't say I don't have a settled ideology, I would say, Lene. I'd say I read as much as time permits fairly widely on the subjects that touch on.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, please. It's not, the question is not about you
Yeah.
personally. It's more about the position as an administrator.
Sure.
What resources and textbooks and tools are you using to cause change at our university? So
that's a whole separate question then.
Well, it's great that you're reading and that you care about reparations and stuff, but
Sure.
are you using all of this knowledge to actually push
Right.
towards this change or not? That's a yes or no.
Okay, very separate question, Mariam. So Lene, sorry for misinterpreting your question. So we could agree or disagree about this as an approach, but what I'm very interested in is how do you systematize change? And what I sense that we have already on this campus is many offices and organizations doing actually marvelous work in support of our BIPOC students, our faculty and staff of color, many pockets of activity that I could be very, very proud of. But what we have not yet succeeded in doing is systematizing our processes so that everybody on campus feels they have equal access to supportive infrastructure, such that if and when they perceive a challenge at whatever scale, small or large, they equally feel they have access to those supports, if that makes sense. And so that's what informs my thinking, is how do we systematize?
Okay, so really there's no, what I'm hearing is that there's no like straight line into like what happens like in order to think about institutional change.
I wouldn't say that, Lene. What it takes is articulating like for each individual entity or unit that's operating on campus, finding ways for that entity to both be equally accessible to all members of the campus. And so that's a communications and accessibility question, but that information that flows into that operation or that unit is equally accessible to entities across campus, so that the response is not hyper-local, right? Okay. So this is complicated in as much as it's about organizational structures, which sounds really boring and really management-y, and I apologize for that, but it is, I believe, at the heart of how you make the whole institution change culturally, right? When people feel they have equal access to resources of support, and they don't feel intimidated about reaching out and grabbing those resources, then we will know that we are able to do battle with the cultural norms that come with us all to campus every day. And that, so that, in my head, that doesn't sound muddy, but I completely appreciate that if you're not from that framework, it sounds like a muddy thing, but it's about information access, it's about data sharing, it's about information sharing, it's about ensuring that the funding and supports are appropriate. And I know that sounds boring, I'm sorry, but it is how you change the whole culture at once, like how you grab the whole institution.
Okay.
Sorry, Lene.
Time to like debunk everything, but Mariam, do you want to ask the last question?
If we're talking about systemizing within a system that doesn't work, I think that it is crucial to actually hyper-focalize on the people who are not getting access to any of the resources and everything that the university is giving. You need to focus on the individuals who are not getting access to these resources in order to make sure that like every student on our campus is being able to access them. If we're talking about accessibility and all of that, you do need a hyper-focalized. And that's why we talk about centering the voices and the needs of QD and BIPOC communities. We need a hyper-focalized. Malika, do you have a question?
I don't have a question. That was a statement. I felt like Liesl was definitely dodging the straightforward question and just trying to go on a tangent to deflect answering it. Yes, change seems like it's this whole big like difficult stepping stool where like we have multiple steps, but it really isn't. I feel like the reason that this kind of topic always gets shut down by white people is because the identity that they have created for themselves is solely based off oppression of BIPOC people, and they acknowledge that to the fullest and do not want to change that, because without that type of superiority, they have nothing. Their identity is gone. So again, it was a very straightforward question that was asked for you to answer, and you tried to deflect and tire us out. So please stop doing that. That is what I want to say. It's not a question. I'm just stating.
Cool. Okay, President Robbins, whenever there has been a major event on our campus that has been followed by a campus conversation, the Arizona 3 Assault on the Black Student and other spring campus conversations that you have attended, you have always sat on the sidelines and have allowed your team to speak for you. We understand that your job is not to make choices, obviously, and we understand that your job is to manage, because that is what you do. However, what structural and procedural changes are you going to commit to in order to proactively engage in these movements of institutional change that effectively and equitably address issues of anti-blackness, racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and other isms and phobias experienced by the QD and BIPOC students? Liesl, we'll also want you to answer the question. And again, please do not try to go into this whole tangent and make it personal, because this is not about you. And please keep it really short and concise.
So I think it starts with acknowledging that these are truisms from the time of this country being settled and started with people from Europe. Native land was taken. The enslavement of people from Africa, the enslavement of Asians to build much of the Western Railroad. All of these things are histories that we have to first acknowledge, and that this continues, as you've pointed out many times. There's still systematic and structural racism in this country and in every institution in this country. So to acknowledge that and say, we're gonna work to make things better. And the tangible things I think we will get to in your opening remarks. You said that we didn't have time for a longer meeting. I think we have a 2-hour meeting scheduled, and that will be a series of 2-hour meetings that we can discuss the demands that you have and those things that we will work together to accomplish.
Liesl.
Sure. I support President Robbins' approach in this regard. We absolutely welcome the opportunity to continue the dialogue and work together to make the changes that you all want to see and we all want to see. It will take a team. That also might feel frustrating, but it does take a team. Neither President Robbins nor I think we've got all the answers. We don't. So we can expect to see a team come together to do this work. We have some fabulous, wonderful, amazing faculty and staff standing by, eager to support and help as we try and reform the campus institutionally. And that enthusiasm and energy, I think, brings real value to the dialogue.
Malika, you had a response?
I just feel like you acknowledging that there's a history of oppression with systemic racism in our country especially, and saying all of what you know, your facts in a way, doesn't really, again, like align with how you have dealt with hate crimes and oppression of like students on your campus. 2 white students in this past fall have assaulted a Black student, calling him a nigger and physically harming him, and they were forced to only write an essay. So how does that even, like, that punishment isn't a punishment. It's like as if they were in pre-K and it's a slap on the wrist, like, oh my gosh, don't do that to me, when you acknowledge that that is a very harmful act that was committed, but the way that the school handled it was very piss poor. So you to know that this history is very harmful, this is what has been going on for generations and generations, and it holds trauma for us, even if we haven't faced it head on, but then to not really even like stand by those words in a sense if I'm making any sense. But again, like that's how the school handled that one incident, showing that they don't care for their students of color. They only care to sweep these type of incidents under the rug as fast as possible.
So that's
May I respond to that?
No, you may not respond to that, sorry. So we're just gonna move in to, again, the other thing is that you did mention that we need a team. We are a team and we're down to be a team and do this collaboratively, but it also means, again, you didn't even commit to any of like the structural or procedural changes that you're willing to acknowledge and commit to in order to make these changes. And it's like, we keep asking these questions and it's like, let's talk in circles. Let's do all these other things but answer the question, and we're not going to do that. So let's move on. In terms of addressing everything that we just talked about in terms of like policing, we didn't even actually get to the core of policing, because again, y'all refuse to even acknowledge the deep rooted issues of policing on our campus and what it means for Black and Brown students on our campus. And so our list of demands, number 2 through 6, let me actually just pull them up but 2 through 6, we have solutions that contribute to how we can actually focus on providing safety to students. And I want to acknowledge the fact that, Brian Seastone, you think that safety is synonymous with policing and policing is synonymous with safety. And that's not true. That's not how students, especially Black students, find safety, is not through policing and all of these other things that your police officers do. But anyways, our list of demand 2, 3, 6. Number 2 talks about divesting the police department and reallocating those funds. 3 talks about demanding the university to sever ties with Tucson Police Department, Border Patrol, ICE, and other police departments. 4 talks about, again, reallocating funds. 5, putting those funds into the cultural resource centers to create more space and to give them more funding in order to do what they need to do in order to reach students. 6, again, is creating more community-based responses to emergencies and crises on our campus. So we want to reiterate the fact that when it comes to policing, that doesn't bring safety to students at all. That's not, we need to reimagine and rethink what it means to provide safety to students without immediately thinking about policing. And our solutions to that is, of course, providing all the basic needs for students. 1, reallocating those funds to the cultural resource centers so that they can take on initiatives, meaning doing the work that they're doing and just taking it a step further and expanding it across our campus and reaching more students. 2, creating more community-based responses to things such as mental health and other things that students need where police should not be called. 3, allocating funds to the survivor advocates in order to address issues of sexual assault and violence on our campus, because obviously they don't have the funds and they don't have the resources in order to do that effectively, and that's a problem. And 5, again, we shouldn't have to constantly think that we need the police in order to keep students safe, in order to meet students' needs. So our demand of divesting and reallocating the funds of UAPD's budget to other areas on our campus that actually center on student success and student initiatives is non-negotiable. So that is something that we do want to happen, is divesting UAPD's budget. So is that something that you all could actually commit to and actually accomplish? And that's a yes or no question. Because again, it's so easy. The university will never abolish UAPD, unfortunately. You all will never disarm UAPD, unfortunately. And so again, we're focusing on the money and the budget because those funds, it's so easy to reallocate them to things that actually matter to students, things that actually will help them succeed and change.
May I respond to that?
Go ahead.
Yes, I would be open to talk about reallocating resources away from UAPD to the cultural centers and to hire individuals that mental health individuals, social workers, and things that we need in the cultural centers. The previous example of a budget of 1.9 million for student success is just not right. That is not a true number. But I would be open to talk about decreasing funding to the police department, but not completely abolishing it, as you state, not severing ties with Tucson Police Department, as you demand.
So in terms of like speaking, we actually mean that like moving beyond just having conversations. Is that something that you're able to actually get done? That's the question. We can have conversations about it. Okay, Liesl?
Yep.
Yes, no?
So it falls outside my budget, the policing question, but supportive, yes.
Lisa?
Falls within my budget and I'm supportive as well.
Brian? You're muted, by the way. You're muted.
Yes, and I've already said that I would love to have mental health workers be able to respond to a number of events that unfortunately the law enforcement has been relegated to do over the years because there's not individuals to respond 24 hours a day.
Kendall?
Sorry about that. Yes, absolutely. I'm here to support and make sure that we are addressing and acting on the demands that you've sent us.
John?
Yes.
Okay, so again, we do have a deadline for our list of demands. And when our meeting of the 2-hour meeting happens, we also want to acknowledge the fact that we do have a deadline. And so this is not going to be just us having conversations, us having to negotiate, us having to compromise, because we're past that. And I understand that this is a very uncomfortable thing and very controversial thing of like, there's a lot of controversy around these type of issues, but it's literally what needs to happen in order to actually move towards something that is much bigger than all of us, much bigger than you, Brian Seastone, or you, Liesl Folks, or you, President Robbins. And so it's very important to us that you actually, when you say yes, you're ready to do the work, you're ready to inconvenience yourself in order to be part of these movements for students, led by students. Okay, so we're literally like 15 minutes past our time, but we do have some deliverables. There's 4 of them. Originally, we did want President Robbins and Brian Seastone to release a campus-wide apology. Obviously, Brian Seastone is not going to apologize for thinking that he was keeping people safe, when in reality, he was agitating them. So we don't expect an apology from you, Brian Seastone. However, President Robbins, because you owe a responsibility to the students on our campus, and because what happened on June 6th was much bigger than, like, it didn't just affect UA students. It affected a bigger community that's outside of the university. So we do want you to release a campus-wide apology acknowledging the harm that you have caused, specifically to the Black Lives Matter Tucson folks who helped organize that event, because they shouldn't have been able to go through that traumatizing event and that interaction with you. That was not okay. So we do want you to release a campus-wide apology, specifically addressing Black Lives Matter Tucson, and we want that statement on Friday, 12 p.m.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Okay, great, fantastic. 2, we want an itemized UAPD budget to be released on Monday, 12 p.m. because we know that budgets are moral documents of where priorities and values are made clear, and we want to understand that there's there needs to be transparency. And in order for that to happen, all of that information should be public on somewhere on the university website, because there's no reason for us students to have to go to external resources just to get these numbers that, again, you have said that are not true. So we want that itemized budget to be on the UA website somewhere released so that students can understand where the money is being allocated towards.
Yeah, we're not doing that either.
Great. 3, the scheduling of 2 hours meeting, that was done. And then 4 is back in fall semester, we had a meeting with BSU and UAPD, not UAPD, Brian Seastone, and everyone else. And you all said that we created a list of, hold on. So we created a list of actions to be taken and by the end of the academic year. The first action was contract with national expert and campus law enforcement with expertise in equity and inclusion and community policing to conduct a review of UAPD and make recommendations. Lisa, you were the responsible administrative. The progress of that was a short list of 3 national experts has been identified and proposals have been requested. So with that, we want to know what happened because there was never a follow-up. And we want to know what happened with that action plan. 2, there's also the other one that was saying that begin a review of the past 3 years of enforcement actions for any disparities in race and ethnicity. Lisa and Brian, you two were the responsible administrators. The progress statement was that the data has been compiled and is being analyzed. Is it possible for that data that you all have been analyzing and compiling for the past 10 months to be released to the public?
That data has been vetted by OGC and will be reviewed by the UAPD Campus Advisory Board. It's not information that we can release to the public, but we will share it with the Campus Advisory Board. The reason why it can't be shared with the public is that you could potentially have personally identifiable information because some of the stats are so small that you could potentially identify one individual. So we are prepared to share that information with the Campus Advisory Board. In terms of the national review, what happened with the status of that is that unfortunately a pandemic hit campus. We had planned to do the review in the spring semester. We did not want to move forward with the review while our stakeholders were not available in person on campus for review. We do plan to move forward with that review in the fall semester.
Cool. And then the next one was provide a fair and impartial policing training to all UAPD officers, including an assessment component. That was the responsibility for that one was Brian Seastone and Lisa. And the progress statement was a trainer has been identified and tentatively scheduled for February and April. We understand that the pandemic did happen, but we also want to know what those topics were going to be and what the assessment was going to be. Because all of these solidarity statements have been released. All of these, like we support the Black brothers and sisters and we support diversity initiatives and all of these other things of like we want to change the university. Like all of these statements and empty promises have been released, yet nothing promising is even has been accomplished. And your responses in this meeting, the fact that you can't even release a apology or like an acknowledgement to the wider community, especially Black Lives Matter Tucson, that's a problem, Brian Seastone. And although you said that, yes, you all are committed to doing this work, unfortunately, like, I don't think that it's even gonna happen. Like, I honestly do not think that you all are actually prepared to do what is necessary, especially if you can't even release a statement.
Can I answer about the fair and impartial policing?
Go ahead.
Actually, the first part was conducted in February, and parts of that was done with the command staff and members of the community, including the campus advisory board members attended that. The second portion is next week with the line officers and the police and the supervisors, which will occur on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. That was all scheduled to occur in April, but the Fair and Impartial Policing organization that is putting this on asked to postpone it until it was a safer time following the pandemic. So that is being followed through and will be completed next week.
Cool. So is there a way for us for the agenda of that training to be released?
Yes.
Cool. When can that be released and where?
Well, actually a member of the CAB was part of that and had the agenda, but I'll release it. I'll send it to you.
Cool. So that is all that we have. And what this meeting has taught us is that you all have said, yes, you're committed, but it doesn't seem that you all are ready to inconvenience yourselves, to challenge yourselves, and to step out of your own comfort zone to do what is necessary for our university, specifically for the QT and BIPOC communities on our campus. And that is unfortunate, but again, that's just it. Like, it's really unfortunate and just frustrating, but I'm not even gonna say that's okay because that's not okay. But that is all that we have.
I would also like to say, sorry, Marian, that we worked, really hard because, we're meeting with, the upper division, and we worked hard, wrote the demands, wrote this and that, and we just feel like nothing has transmitted to any of you. And it is heartbreaking as students of the University of Arizona that the president won't even just outright said no to an apology. And that was so quick. I've never seen anything that quick. But I'd like y'all to just go and think about what it means to be working at a university. It means you work with students. It means you work with people that you work with us. But anyway, like I said, we ran out of time. We will speak more in the 2-hour meeting, definitely.
I also wanted to say that I don't ever want to read a statement from you, President Robbins, saying that you care about Black Lives Matter when you clearly do not.
Yeah.
You do not care about Black Lives Matter when you're not willing to even issue a statement. So don't ever release a statement that says that you care about Black lives. Are standing in solidarity with Black lives when you won't even issue a statement.
Yeah.
Because you don't care.
Nope.
You don't care that's literally so easy. All of these things are so easy. And you're so, all of the things that you've done so far in regards to George Floyd's death, actually murder, has just been very performative. You're not listening, and you're not ready. You are not ready to actually do what is right. You're not ready to inconvenience yourself. You're not ready to get out of your own comfort zone to do what is right. And I don't want you to ever say that you care about Black lives and that you're ready for institutional change when your actions and your words say otherwise, because you don't care. You do not care. And
our mental health is also being compromised, crying because we have to beg for equal rights. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. You have to wake up. You have to wake up and you have to see what we go through on your campus every single day. It's not enough to be in your offices and be like, oh yes, we're going to look at a book on anti-racism. A book on anti-racism. I'm right here. Help me. I'm being attacked. Someone said a racist thing to me. Help me. Don't read a book. I'm right here. So if you're not ready to do that, like Marian said, don't say you care about us. Don't. It's not right. Our mental health, and we don't do well at school, and we have all of these things also because of what we go through. In that 2-hour meeting, you will listen to our demands and they will be done as we want them. That's a promise.
And also to add is the fact that we're going in debt and giving this school money for what? Again, like I said, for when you're being paid to do a job, you're supposed to give your outright most, like your 100%. And it just seems like if these demands followed with money or whatever incentive that might make you look better or might make the school look better and not so controversial, it would make you more willing to not only apologize, but come out with statements, as Marianne said, that it shouldn't be so hard to say, we denounce racism on our campus and we denounce these students that we're admitting that are racist and hold these views. And it's just baffling to see how backwards the school reacts to when people try to do good and try to get justice and try to fight for equality and what's right, and how they're shunned, ostracized, or even fired, in the sense, like we have said, that there's staff that do try and they're shut down. And it's just, again, like, what is the point of going into debt to get higher education at a school that once I get my degree, I don't feel proud to be a part of, or that I went through this journey of trauma and really crappy experiences, because those are there. You hired people who don't want us to succeed. You yourself, by not wanting to apologize or recognize what is going on within your campus, are a part of that oppression as well. And it is very anti-Black to be doing what you are doing. And whether that makes you feel some type of way, it is also, in a sense, racist. You have power to make change, and you are in a position of power in multiple ways. You are a white male in America, and we have seen how that goes so much further than our voices as just a group, a collective. And I'm pretty sure in your lifetime, you have seen a lot of injustices, and I just feel like you have stood there and been a bystander, and that is just as violent as committing those crimes you probably have witnessed. I am so disappointed that I ever accepted admission from the U of A, and I even wasted my money coming here and going into debt for a school that does not care for their students, only for what they're gaining out of it, whether it is a great PR look or whatever, or more money. Like, that just is, I can't even say it's sad or like shocking, because that is how our country has been working.
I also wanted to add that, like, you were put as the president after Ann Weaver Hart, who didn't renew her contract, and the hope, because she failed in the sense of the list of demands and the BSU marching and protesting and like applying pressure on her, because she failed. I feel confident enough to say that everyone's hope when you were our president was that you would actually do everything in your power to actually address these systems and address the ways that university is upholding white supremacy and anti-Blackness and racism on an administrative level, and get institutional change in order to address issues. Because it's not just a conversation, it's not just a simple policy change, it's not just having, again, a conversation or doing these little Instagram posts and little promises and statements that literally don't mean anything. It's literally understanding the ways that these systems work and the ways that these things are actually rooted in the university in terms of systemically and everything else. And you just told us, like, you're not willing to dismantle those systems and to dismantle your own biases in order to address these issues, in order to effectively and actionably do things that actually fix these issues. And it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna feel comfortable going into our meeting with that fact in the back of my head. Like, it's just gonna be an empty conversation. It's going to be another repetition of what happened in 2016, and these things are not going to change, and they're going to continuously happen. Black folks on your campus are continuously going to be facing violence if you're not willing to acknowledge that, like, these systems exist at your university. If you're not going to commit to changing these systems, these systems, and acknowledging the ways that you actually contribute to them. You're literally contributing to it right now by not even, like, understanding it, or like, it's, I just don't understand how you're not even comfortable with addressing these issues on a systemic level. and changing your framework. Because again, like, this is something that has been here for many years. And these issues are going to arise. Students are going to continue protesting. Lists of demands are going to be released until you understand that this is much more than just a simple isolated incident. It's something that has been here, and it's going to continue to be here until you rework the way that the systems at your university work and function. And so, again, there was hope for you, President Robbins, to do better and to hold yourself at a higher standard than President Hart. And obviously, you are literally on the same level as her, and you may even be worse because you acknowledge that these things exist, but you don't want to do anything. But yet you're saying that you are ready, but you actually are not ready. And that is all. And I just want to say that, like, again, don't ever say that Black Lives Matter if you're not ready for this, because you're not ready, and you don't care for Black people. You really do not care about Black people. And that's disappointing. And before I get even more emotional, I'm just gonna end the meeting. Thank you for our allies for being here, and thank you for COBA for being here. And I appreciate you all for working tirelessly with me on the letter and preparing for this meeting. And obviously, you got to see what it means to talk to administrators and what it means when we say that administration does not listen and is not ready for the work to be done. And it's going to be a tireless journey of just conversations and actions that are not sustainable. And even though it's disheartening, I'm glad that you all were able to be part of it. Kendall, you're our point of contact, so you can just email the COBA email for the details of our next meeting. Thank you, and yeah,